Hi everyone, this is your host Prasha and welcome to her STEM Stories episode number 92. Here's wishing you and your family a very happy new year 2020, and I hope this year brings everything that you wish for. And today I'm starting the tradition of reading iTunes reviews. So today I want to read a review about the solo series where BKT999 said, "The solo series are a must listen. Prasha's solo series are a welcomed addition to her STEM story. We finally get to learn about the host herself. Prasha is authentic when discussing her path in STEM and shows her wisdom through her actionable advice." So thank you so much, BKT999, for leaving this wonderful review. And if you haven't tuned in yet, I have a solo series that comes out every Monday, so you should definitely go check it out. And in today's episode, we are talking to a phenomenal STEM influencer, Daisy Shu, who is an optometrist who moved from Australia to in US to go to Harvard Medical School. And she is amazing. She's a researcher. She's an influencer. She has a wonderful Instagram. She's built a wonderful community. And she's actually one of the only guests on the show that I've met in person. I haven't met a lot of people in person, but Daisy is definitely a friend. And I see her all the time when I go to Boston. So this is a very special conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's get started.
Welcome to Her STEM Story, a podcast about real women with extraordinary science, technology, engineering, and mathematics stories. In this show, we'll talk to some absolutely inspiring women and highlight some women-led organizations in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We'll learn more about their work, their struggles, and how they think we can close the gender gap in STEM professions. Keep listening to get inspired.
Our guest today is none other than Daisy Shu. So if you're online, you know who Daisy is. And if you're not, then you need to go follow her. She's a postdoctoral research fellow at the Harvard Medical School, and she studies the eye. She's our first optometrist, and she has completed her optometry school from the University of New South Wales, Sydney, Australia, and PhD from the University of Sydney in Australia as well. She has so many fellowships and achievements in her resume that it will take me forever to read all of them. But she is definitely someone to look forward to in the eye research, and she is passionate about science communication, and she's also completed courses in science communication. She's also hosted a podcast in the past, and she is incredible and very accessible on social media. So let's talk to Daisy to learn more about her and the eye. Hi, Daisy. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Prasha. It's so great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, that's awesome. So as I was saying before, you're probably one of the only guests on the show after 100 episodes that I have met in person.
Yay.
Like before interviewing. So I've only met a few people.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, I've only met a couple of people in person.
Yeah, we met multiple times as well.
I know. It's so much fun. I have a friend in Boston.
Yay.
So that's awesome. And your story is amazing. So tell us what you do today. What are you doing in Boston when you kind of grew up in Sydney and in Australia? So tell us a little bit about what do you do now?
Okay, so now I'm a postdoc at Harvard Medical School. I'm in eye research, and I look at how diseases of the retina, that's at the back of our eyes, how diseases form in that tissue. And I look at it from the perspective of metabolism and mitochondria, because lots of the diseases of the eye are age-related. So we're living longer, and but our eyes are still deteriorating. And that's something that we're trying to figure out why that's happening. And one big age-related disease is age-related macular degeneration. So that's what I research.
Mm-hmm. I understood parts of it, but I did understand that eyes are eyes may not be as healthy as we would be because we're living longer. And so we need to do a lot of research to help us there. And you go to Harvard. I mean, Harvard, what? How did that happen?
I know. It's crazy. Honestly, I'm still pinching myself. I can't believe I'm at Harvard, because I'm just like a Sydney girl, and now I'm on the other side of the world. So the story about that was, it all started last year, really. So it was the final year of my PhD at the University of Sydney. And my dream was to actually go to Harvard. I'm not even joking. I was just like, it's Harvard. Of course I want to go there. Like, and my dream was to leave Sydney and go somewhere else for my postdoc. So I knew I was going out of the country. And in terms of where, it was sort of, I actually had some offers elsewhere, like at really prestigious places as well, like Johns Hopkins and Stanford. But in the end, like, I don't know why, I just like really like the idea of Harvard, because obviously it's Harvard. So I ended up looking into some research that was happening in the eye field of Harvard, because my PhD was also in eye diseases. So it was in cataract. And the crazy thing that I found was that a group in Harvard found a very like interesting result that matched some of the findings I did, except instead of cataract, they were looking at the front of the eye, the corneal tissue, and you can get scarring of the cornea. So if, for example, you get an injury to the front of your eye, so someone like scratches your eye, or you get like something penetrating into the eye, then you can damage the surface of the tissue, and that tissue is called the cornea. And what they found very similar things to me, except from a different perspective and a different tissue. So I emailed them, and I didn't even know them. They didn't know me. I emailed them, and I was like, hey, I found, so my research is on growth factors, which they do a lot of things for different parts of our body. And what they need to do is they need to bind to a receptor on the surface of the cell. So they're floating around outside the cell, and they need to bind onto a receptor. And each one has its partner receptor. So, for example, like growth factor A will bind onto growth factor A's receptor, and growth factor B will bind onto growth factor B's receptor. So that's really established, and it's fine. So what I found was that growth factor A was activating growth factor B receptor. And then I was like, hold on, that's really interesting. So that was one surprising result from my my PhD research. But then the Harvard people found that the growth factor B could also stimulate growth factor A receptor. So kind of the reverse of what I found, but like from a different perspective, and also in a different tissue. And I told them that, and I was like, isn't that really interesting? And I found your work really interesting. And then they pretty much were like, would it be okay for you to come and do like a summer research project with us? And that's how it all started. Mm-hmm. That was in a different lab at Harvard. They were unfortunately unable to take me as a postdoc, because they had agreed to take another postdoc. So I was like, well, no, I really want a postdoc here because it's such a great institute. Yeah. And then I was talking to some other people in the institute, and they said, well, there's another opening in my current PI's lab. And then I emailed her, and then there you go. That's the story of how I got my postdoc here.
So what I'm hearing is that first of all, you're really, really smart, because if all these colleges wanted you have to be really special. Yeah, it's super cool. I love how you see different perspectives, and I love that you are open to, diverse ideas. And again, as you said, even in your research, like if someone's finding something different, you were not so much opposed to it. You just tried to see like how interesting that was, because a lot of times when we come across different perspectives, like the first thing we do is kind of shut off, or get defensive, or we're like, no, what I found is correct. And you know what I'm saying? Like, it's really interesting, and it's really important in science for sure. And that's why this work of diversity and inclusion in general is so important, that people realize that all of us don't think alike, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's so important.
And so what got you interested in the eye, like of all the things?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the eye, I would say, is a really complex structure, and not many people research it. And I guess like the origins of like me being in the field was even before I started research. So that would have been high school. And honestly, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to do something that was health related, but also not too gory. So the eye is not, I mean, there is blood involved in the eye, but it's not as intense as if I was doing medicine, for example, and it's the entire body. And I like just kind of honing in on one complex organ and just understanding it completely. And it is so crazy complex. And of course, it also connects to the brain. In fact, it's known as an extension of the brain. So if anything, it's also tapping into understanding how the brain works.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Did you have a role model growing up? Was there someone that you looked up to?
Yeah, definitely. The person who inspired me to do my PhD is my favorite person ever in the whole research field. And her name is Michelle Madigan. And I absolutely adore her. She inspired me to pursue a PhD back in 2005. Yeah, 2005. I did my first research project with her, and it was one of those summer research projects you can do after third year university. And I remember doing like a month's worth of research, and it was my first time like wearing gloves and mixing things. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. And then she actually suggested that I do a PhD after I graduate. So that's pretty much what I did. Well, essentially, I graduated, then I worked as an optometrist for 2 years. And then after that, I decided to do the PhD.
Oh, that's interesting. Isn't it so cool to have role models? And then you are doing the same thing by creating your own space and your own, let's say tribe on Instagram and Twitter, and you have so many loyal followers. And so tell us a little bit about that. How did all that come to be?
Yeah, that was so fun. Like, honestly, I just started, Twitter, I started a lot earlier. And it's just so fun. Like there's a huge science community on Twitter now, with a lot more of the lab heads actually joining. So I feel like the audiences are slightly different from Twitter versus Instagram. But it's just so amazing. Like I can't believe I've met all these people. In fact, just last week, I got to catch up with someone that I had connected with at a conference, and then we kept in touch via Twitter, which is so crazy. And she came to my graduation ceremony. Aww. So I know, I was so touched. Her name's Sabrina, and she's like so awesome, and she's currently a PhD student in plant biology. So she studies plants, which is super cool. And on Instagram, I have made so many new friends, and I feel like the audience is slightly different in that I feel like there are some non-scientists who also follow me, which I think is so amazing. So and also, it's just more diverse. And hopefully I can inspire some people to start to appreciate science the way I do.
And so what's your strategy? You have a lot of following. So what's your secret? Because I think I know your secret, but I want to hear from you. What's your secret?
Okay. So honestly, like, I think the secret is persistence and regular posting. So like, the thing is, I started my Instagram. Yeah, I'm surprised, just as surprised as you that I have so many followers on Instagram.
No, I'm not surprised. I am just curious. I think you totally deserve it, and you deserve much more.
Oh, thank you. On Twitter, I definitely don't have as many, and that's interesting. And I'm thinking it's because of the audiences. Like, there's more non-scientists who follow me on Instagram. So I think what it is like finding a niche kind of thing, like finding something that an insight into a scientist's life that people don't get to see much. And that's why I think if I was a non-scientist, for example, I may follow my account because I'm like really curious about what scientists do all day. And so my tip is like to have a lot of insights into what you do on a day-to-day in terms of like, what do your experiments look like? And if you see a lot of my earlier posts when I first started, the posts were mainly like what my experiment looked like my 96-well plate, for example, or my pipettes. Even something as simple as a pipette that I use every single day is actually really exciting to someone who doesn't get to experience lab life. Even just like all the colors that you see in the laboratory, because everything's really like color coded and it's really pretty like that. I think that's really engaging visually. So I have, so with that, the photos are really fun. Also mixing it up with videos I think is really good too, because they're just more engaging and fun. And you can, I've had some where I'm speaking in them, but mostly it's just me doing actions, like for example pipetting. And the other tip I have is to use hashtags. So I have a string of hashtags that I usually put after my post. And I think that helps. I'm actually not sure if that helps, because I've literally posted something without using those hashtags, and it's gotten more likes than when I use those hashtags. So I really don't know what the secret is.
Yeah, but what I think your secret is that you're yourself. Like, you're so authentic, and you don't have an agenda, and you don't have any, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're just you. Like, in person and on Instagram.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. Like, one thing is on this particular Instagram is I don't care so much about like making the photo perfect. So that's a lot of resistance on my part of my personal Instagram, which is really funny. I have another Instagram account that like I use just like my personal one, and honestly I always feel this like urge to make every single photo perfect. I don't know why. So there's so much resistance and I hardly post there. So yeah, the trick with that is just presenting it as is and not as unedited as possible.
Yeah. No, I think that to me that's your secret. I think that's definitely something that attracts people to you.
I think you cracked the code.
And definitely also breaking that stereotype around science and scientists, and of course people who are at Harvard. Like for us, it's like, oh my God, this is a normal human being at like world's most premier institute. And it's amazing to see that, through your channels. And then I'll also give you a little Instagram course, because you said this question. I recently learned that if you switch your profile to a business profile, right? So if you just go and change it to business profile, you will get, every picture will get the insights. So when you get the insights and you click on it, and you can actually expand it. So when you expand it, it shows you how many people did you attract from hashtags, which I think is super cool. I didn't know that.
That's really smart. Oh my God, I did not know that.
Yes, if you go
I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, because when you do view insights, it only gives you this little bar. And I always thought that bar is the only insight I get. But when you like swipe up, it expands, and at the bottom it'll show you from hashtags, from pages, from different things. Then you can see like if your hashtags really work or not. So little tip.
Okay, I'm definitely gonna try that after this.
I was shocked too. I was like, wait, what? You can see all this stuff right here. So tell me, out of all this, like, how do you make time? Because you are also at every single conference that happens in this world. And I know you're doing more in 2020. And then you make time to hang out with us at the Wing and at places in Boston. And then you're also on your Instagram, on Twitter, and doing your full-time research and postdoc. And then you fly to Sydney, and then you come back, and then you do this interview. So you do so many wonderful things. What's your biggest... First of all, maybe there's a struggle with it, but if you have figured out, what would you like to tell us about how you juggle your time?
Ooh, that's always constantly on my mind. Like, how do I fit everything in? And honestly, I think I have a tendency to like say yes to everything. That's also an issue. All women do. yeah. And so I have to like pretty much find the time. You can always find the time. That's what I realized. Like, you can always do it, and sort of put yourself in that position, and then you'll somehow miraculously your body will adapt, and you'll be able to achieve all those things that you wanted to achieve. Because once you've said yes, you kind of feel bad like not doing it, so then you end up doing it. And so some things are kind of locked in, like the flights. So for example, conferences, I've already agreed, like my conference abstract is in. So like I'm pretty much definitely have to make that work no matter what. But yeah, like definitely if I'm traveling, for example, then I'm not doing an experiment. And that is something that you definitely have to kind of deal with. And sometimes I actually get this, I don't know if any of your viewers out there feel this who are also in research, but there's this like guilt that you feel when you're not in the lab, or if you're in the lab and at your desk and not doing an experiment. Like sometimes I feel really guilty and I'm like, oh my gosh, I should be like wearing gloves right now. And then when my boss walks past, I know like absolutely she knows that I need to be doing desk work sometimes, but I personally, I'm like, I should be looking busy, like, you know, I need to be wearing gloves, and like actually doing, you know, pipetting or something. And it's really interesting that I feel this way. And I think it's all about just like telling yourself that it's okay to feel that way. So there is a time and place for doing experiments, and I just have to juggle that. But yes, definitely if I'm on Instagram, then at a certain time of day that is possibly like, you know, in the lab, then I need to be mindful of that. And I need to set like boundaries for that and figure out, okay, well, I need to, you know, for example, Instagram is reserved for when I'm commuting or something like that. And that way, like I can try to juggle everything that I do.
Yeah. And you could call it hashtag bench guilt. I guess it's like your guilt for being on the bench.
Oh my gosh, bench guilt. That's what it is. It is.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, I want your viewers to let us know if they actually
if they have
feel
it,
that
use
way.
if you have the bench guilt, use hashtag bench guilt and tag Her STEM Story and Daisy Shoe in your posts. But I think women feel like that. And in your field, I'm sure, you know, of course the gender gap is still, I mean, I'm sure it's prevalent. And tell us, because you've been on both sides of the world, in Australia and in the US, and I've seen, you know, from an outsider's perspective, you know, that Australian government and the things in Australia for women in STEM and promoting women in STEM is really like, you know, at least I get to see a lot of those, you know, initiatives. Do you see like a major difference between how diversity inclusion is dealt with in the two countries, or there's not much difference and it's more inclusive in both countries? Like, well, what's your take on that, like having studied on both sides of the world?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And surprisingly, I haven't experienced too many differences, but it might be like I'm in a more unique position where predominantly I'm surrounded by more women in my lab environment. In my PhD, although my supervisor was a man, like pretty much like all the lab, the students of the lab were female, and there were like a handful of guys that were also in the lab, but predominantly female. And then in my current lab, my PI is female, and pretty much like we're all girls, so like pretty much an all-girl team, plus a couple of people who come and help us, which have been guys. So like I'm in a more unique position where I haven't really experienced too much of the gender gap in it. And yeah, it's been pretty good, like in both institutes that I've been at. In fact, during my PhD, we didn't have too many programs to, you know, that was specific for women. And that might have been a time thing as well, because I feel like there's more and more workshops now for women, supporting women. And when I was back, actually just a few months ago, I attended a workshop at Harvard Medical School run by the postdoc office, and it was called #IamRemarkable. And it was literally designed for women and minorities to learn how to promote themselves, because it's actually an initiative from Google, and they found that women don't tend to self-promote. Women and minorities don't tend to self-promote. And it was about breaking that barrier and trying to encourage women to self-promote. So we did an exercise where we all got a blank sheet of paper that just said, I'm remarkable at the top, and we had to basically write, I'm remarkable because, and we had to list everything. And then surprisingly, we actually had to stand up, and each of us read it out to everybody in that workshop. and then we all like clapped and, you know, cheered each other on with each of these statements. And it was a really nice environment. And the instructor actually suggested that we do this exercise more just to practice that idea of self-promotion. And I never had that experience back in the University of Sydney, but I think it might have been because I was a PhD student at the time. I'm not sure. There might be programs there, or it could be a timing thing.
It's more popular now for sure, I think, on both sides of the world. But I love that you said, you know, you're a part of all women team, and you know there are a lot of women-led teams, you know, across the world in different STEM professions. Like once I had a team, all women engineers, all mechanical engineers, and I was like, oh my God, like all 4% are in this room, like all 4% from the US. But I feel like there's so many like wonderful stories like you're sharing where there are environments, you know, even though we hear a lot of negativity and a lot of different things about academia and, you know, a lot of different things about like gender gap and stuff, but there are really nice environments still that, you know, should make a future PhD hopeful that, you know, the world's not a bad place. And there are some happy PhDs too out there. And there are some labs that are not just inclusive, but all women. And I think that's really cool. Yeah. So from your wonderful and international STEM story, like traveling across continents and, you know, studying this wonderful organ, what's that one big takeaway that someone can take from your story?
I would say that when you find something that you really love to research, you should stick with it and keep on researching that area and keep on learning. And the more you learn about it, the more you fall in love with it even more. So I think that's exactly how I feel about the eye. Like ever since I started learning about the eye back in 2008, that's when I started my story with the eye. I've been addicted to this learning about the eye. And I talk to everybody about the eye, and I feel like it's nice to have that kind of knowledge base and that interest. And literally, like, everybody would see me as someone who associates me with eye research and the eye. So I feel like you can definitely build an expertise with that. So all my friends like would ask me tips on like eye stuff, or like even eye health. They'll ask me like, what should I do? And I'll give them advice. Like, and I'm actually really happy to, because some people like kind of go, oh, I don't want to like ask you because, you know, you probably are sick of dealing with, you know, people asking you eye stuff. But I actually really love getting asked these questions and giving them lots of advice. If they want to listen to it.
Yeah. And I feel like you bring such a great point, because nowadays people get like, not just nowadays, but, you know, we have a tendency to get bored really fast, or just move on to the next thing, or just to look for more excitement, or, you know, just not be patient with the craft or the science or the field that we're in, because it's so glamorized to switch majors and to switch jobs and, you know, do all these things that other people are probably doing. And I feel like if we were just patient with our craft and our science and our professions, you know, we could really become experts at that, and also really fall in love, like you said, like really fall in love with, you know, whatever it is that we're doing, even if it's, you know, something out there that, you know, other people may not study, and that's fine too. So you've truly found your uniqueness, and you've truly like mastered that, you know, and you're on your way to do even more greater things. You're just getting started. So I'm so excited to see, you know, where you'll be. So, but tell us your favorite eye fact, like one fact that about the eye that's going to probably blow my mind. Or not.
To blow your mind. That's a tricky one. Okay. If I had the opportunity to blow someone's mind, okay.
Or not. I mean, it could be just an eye fact that people don't know.
People don't know. Oh, this is so hard.
That's okay. No worries. I can ask you another question.
I can think of some things that aren't that. I don't know. You know how like you think you think like it's just standard knowledge because like,
but
you
it's
already know
not.
it.
Yeah.
So I'm like thinking of okay, I've got a really good one. And this is actually really cool because it's my PhD research.
Okay.
So the lens in our eye, the lens is kind of like a gem. It's almost like a jewel, and people call it that. It's if you take it out, it's like a diamond almost. Well, I'm just exaggerating, but it looks like that. And it is actually really interesting because it sits right inside our eye and it's suspended inside our eye, and it changes shape when we want to see up close. So you know how like you want to read a book, well, or look at your phone, you actually have to change the shape of the lens, and it gets fatter. Lens gets fatter so that we can read. And when we get old, we get this thing called presbyopia, which is where like old people basically can't see, and it hits you at about late 40s. People start to extend their arms like further out, like maybe your parents might experience that, and then they have to wear reading glasses. If they're short-sighted, then they'll take their glasses off and they'll try to read up close. So the really cool thing about the lens, so that's one interesting thing about the lens, but a lot of people might know that already. So the one really cool thing about the lens is that it is actually a structure that never sees anything else in the body. So the contents inside the lens is actually like literally it keeps making itself. Like they are the oldest cells of your body ever, and they never see the external environment of your body. So what it is, there's two cell types in the lens, and there's lens epithelial cells at the front and lens fiber cells, and it's all surrounded by a capsule. So you can imagine like one of those capsule tablets. The contents inside that capsule tablet never gets to see the rest of the body, and it's contained within that capsule. They keep making new proteins and they keep just making it fatter and fatter. That's why it actually thickens with age. So the really interesting thing is some people can actually get an allergic reaction to the contents in the lens as if it's a foreign body. Isn't that interesting? I thought that was so crazy. So literally if for example, you have an injury and there's a rupture of the lens, some people the body may interpret the contents of the lens as a foreign substance because it's been like, I don't know, what if they had like 50 years of never seeing anything, and then suddenly there's a rupture and the contents of the lens explodes, then they can have like, they can attack that substance, which is, I thought that was so crazy. Yeah. So literally the oldest cells in your body are the lens epithelials, the cells inside the lens. And they're also the oldest proteins in your body. And also they are cells, and there are cells and proteins in there that never get to interact with anything else in your body. So it's contained, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that was really cool. That was really cool. First, I didn't know that it was the oldest cell in our body. So that's definitely itself is a big fact for me. But then also the fact that our body does not even know that it exists, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. It never gets to interact. Yeah.
That's super cool. And then before we let you go, tell us your favorite book.
My favorite book is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And it's going to be turned into a movie soon. It has been in the past, but it's going to be turned into a newer version.
It's interesting that in all the interviews that I've ever done, you're probably the only one who has said Little Women. It's such a popular book, right?
I know it is. It's like literally my favorite book ever. I would read it again and again, but intermittent periods throughout my life, because every time I read it again, I feel like differently connected to the characters.
Oh, that's amazing. And thank you so much, Daisy, for taking the time and for sharing your wonderful STEM story with us.
Yay. Thanks for having me. This is really fun.
And that was Daisy with her incredible STEM story. Please use the links in the episode notes to follow Daisy and her amazing work. And do not forget to leave us a review on iTunes. It's 3 steps and it's super simple. Leave us a review on iTunes, take a screenshot, and email it to me at heardstemstory@gmail.com. In response, I'm going to send you free links to Wonder Women in STEM 2019 online conference. And from today till January 10th, you can win these links for free. Like, you can really get them. It's not even a competition. If you leave us a review, you get the links. So please consider leaving those. Thank you so much for listening, and Happy New Year. Bye.